A young girl was visiting Edmonton, Alberta's Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village. For her, it was a giant playground. She ran towards one of the recreated farmhouses and peeked inside the window. A strange, translucent figure was moving through the house. At first, she was both scared and fascinated, until the mysterious figure started to approach her. Needless to say, she spent the remainder of her visit glued to her parents' side.
Just east of Edmonton, Alberta, sits the Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village, a perfect recreation of immigrant life at the turn of the century. Many of the buildings are authentic, moved here and painstakingly restored. Some carried more than just history, and the original residents may still linger on.
As a night watchman was making his rounds, he heard the sounds of a crying baby coming from Haverlick House. As he neared the house, he thought he saw shadows move across the window. Cautiously, he entered, following the sound of the crying. He saw a woman rocking an antique cradle. As he approached, she walked off into a nearby room. But when he looked inside, the room was empty and there was no other exit. He turned and saw the cradle rocking on its own and heard the sound of the crying echoing from the empty cradle. As he reached out to touch it, the crying ended and the cradle suddenly stopped. Many have reported seeing this vision of a young mother rocking the antique cradle and hearing the eerie sounds of a baby crying in the empty Haverlick House. The gift shop at the Ukrainian Village has been the scene of many strange happenings. Although the building itself is new, it seems to have attracted a resident spirit from the past. As an employee was closing for the night, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. A shadowy figure stood at the window, staring into the shop. The figure seemed to vanish into thin air. Curious, she walked into the lobby. Even though she saw nothing, suddenly an invisible force brushed by, pushing her aside. Several nights later, she was alone, arranging figurines for display, when she heard the sound of footsteps in the room with her. But there was no one else there. As she approached the source of the footsteps, they ceased. Suddenly, she found herself face to face with the mysterious figure. Seconds later, the apparition vanished, but the sound of his footsteps continued. Again, she followed the sound into the museum area. There she saw a translucent figure walking away from her and directly through the wall. Recreating life in a turn-of-the-century village requires a dedicated staff. Another employee at the Ukrainian Village was restoring a period farmhouse. The park was closed and she was working alone. It was difficult but satisfying work. She heard the sounds of hoofbeats and an approaching wagon. Inquisitively, she went outside. The employee saw a strange man standing there holding a team of horses, beckoning her to approach. He said nothing. Even more ominous was the eerily silent horses, and once again he beckoned for her to get into the wagon. She ran back to the farmhouse and grabbed her walkie-talkie. Bravely returning outside, she was shocked to find that the horses and the mysterious wagon master had vanished without a trace. To this day, she still wonders what would have happened had she accepted the ride. Many others have reported hearing similar sounds when the park was closed. The sightings of the phantom wagon master and the young mother rocking her cradle make one wonder if the recreation of this historic Ukrainian village is so realistic and true to life that it has drawn spirits from beyond the grave to a new home. One Halloween night, a radio station decided to stage a publicity stunt. The stunt was in keeping with the holiday theme. A member of the staff volunteered to spend the night in the allegedly haunted Firkins house. He was a skeptic and was sure that nothing would happen, but as it turned out, he was wrong. He took a quick tour of the house and decided to settle in, waiting to see if in fact any strange events were going to take place. On the table next to where he was sitting was a book on magic. As he picked it up and started to read, he felt as if he was no longer alone. He began to hear the sound of footsteps echoing through the house. Glimpsing the mysterious figure for a second time, he decided the radio station stunt was concluded.
The Firkins House sits in Alberta's Fort Edmonton Park, a place where original buildings have been moved and restored. But sometimes when you move buildings, certain things have a way of coming with them.
Fort Edmonton Park is Canada's largest living history museum. We depict 4 eras in time from 1846 at a Hudson's Bay fort and then on the streets of 1885, 1905, and 1920. We have historical interpreters in each of the buildings and they bring the park to life. So when you actually come into the park, you ride the train to the fort and then you experience each era and you have hands-on experiences and live life just as it would have been during those time periods.
The Firkins House is now a museum at Fort Edmonton Park. But prior to this, it had been a private home. When the previous owners bought the house, it included the entire estate and some unique personal possessions. The oddest being a ventriloquist dummy owned by a boy that had died there. This dummy seemed to have a will of its own, appearing in the strangest places. Much of the paranormal activity in the house occurs in the bedroom where the boy died. The dummy, among other items, had been kept in the house in memory of this unfortunate boy. The boy had fallen ill and was confined to his room. He spent his final days practicing magic and ventriloquism. Throughout the young boy's illness, his loving mother never left his side. Eventually, the boy succumbed to his illness, and he died with his mother at his side. Their spirits linger on in the house today. Another terrifying incident took place when the owner decided to redecorate the boy's room. As she climbed the stairs, she came face to face with a pale figure blocking her passage. Slowly, she made her way up to investigate. At first, the room seemed empty. Feeling that she was in physical danger from the spirit, the terrified woman chose to donate the house to Fort Edmonton Park. To this day, paranormal researchers flock to study the Firkins house.
I came here to the Firkins house at night to take some photographs. I felt a continuous sense of my every move being watched by someone. I took photos in the 2 bedrooms, and it definitely felt as if I was unwanted. Downstairs, I felt I was being watched, but not in general. More like someone was actually in the room with me. Outside, I took some shots, and there was this certain area on one side of the house that was much colder than even the air around it. And when I took a photograph of the window from the woman's bedroom, the light was on, and the curtain seemed to be pulled back. When I got the film developed, I was surprised by it. There were these strange balls of light in some of the rooms. It was though the film somehow managed to capture the image of the spirits in this house. I will never forget the feeling of being watched from that upstairs window.
Even though the Firkins house has been uprooted from its original foundation, the spirits still feel it is their home. Consider this: the next time you're moving a house, you may be moving more than just plaster and nails. Over thousands of years, the Atlantic Ocean has sculpted the rocks of Peggy's Cove, creating a truly beautiful landscape. It's no wonder a small fishing village of 6,000 receives tens of thousands of visitors passing through it yearly. And like many maritime villages, it too has its own legend. Peggy's Cove draws numerous sightseers. and frequently they see the completely unexpected. A picture-taking traveler was interrupted when he saw a woman standing dangerously near the edge of a rock. Seeing nothing but crashing waves beneath her, he called out to her, warning her of the potential danger. She simply seemed to ignore him. Heroically, the tourist ran to aid the woman in distress. But when he reached the top of the rock, the woman was gone, or so it seemed. The woman was standing where the tourist first saw the lady in blue. Many have had experiences with the Maritime's legendary Lady in Blue.
Peggy's Cove is a beautiful fishing village in Nova Scotia, where people from across Canada come to admire its beautiful lighthouse and majestic cliffs. However, this particular spot attracts not only tourists, but spirits as well.
Hi, my name is Valerie. I'm a resident of Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia. This is a very famous landmark, and it's very popular with tourists for its beauty, its lighthouse, and its ghost stories. The most famous of these ghost stories is the Lady in Blue.
A woman came to Peggy's Cove from Europe, leaving behind her 2 children. Settling near the village, she had hoped to earn enough money to transport her children to Canada. As she looked out over the ocean, her heart was breaking for her children. Her new husband joined her on the rocks, but sensed that something was wrong. He needed to attend to a task, so he asked his wife to wait for him. He could see that she was still upset, so he tried cheering her up. His clown-like act was selfless, particularly given the result, for in his attempt to cheer his wife, he inadvertently gave his own. The Lady in Blue was never seen alive after that day. She seemed to have vanished, as if her life were an apparition. Many speculate she was filled with guilt, that she felt responsible for her husband's death, and so took her own life.
I was walking on these very, very rocks. A friend and I were coming down, having a lovely chat and walking along. We thought we heard something behind us. We turned around, but there was nothing there. So we turned around and continued our walk, and there she was, right in front of us. We didn't know what to do. We were sort of so taken aback, we weren't sure we were really seeing her. And then she just disappeared. So I believe in that legend.
On another occasion, a recreational fisherman had come to the very spot where this young woman's husband died so many years before. The fisherman was to meet a friend who was running late. He went to look for him, leaving his gear behind. When he returned, he found his gear was missing. Searching, he began to find strewn pieces of his equipment. Confused, he carried on, retrieving his scattered items. The fisherman eventually found his equipment, but in doing so, he also found the lady in blue, who apparently seemed vexed with him. Perhaps he reminded her of years long ago. Peggy's Cove, which was named after the only survivor of a schooner that sank in 1800, is one of Canada's most popular tourist destinations, attracting numerous visitors looking to take in the scenic views. But sometimes the sights they see are not at all what they expected. Old buildings often make strange noises. Usually it's just the natural sounds of the building settling, but sometimes the noises are not always what they seem. A young actress who had performed at the Walker Theatre was to discover the theatre had a life of its own.
In its day, the Walker Theatre in Winnipeg, Manitoba, was a toast of the town. People loved this theatre, including the actors who performed here, such notables as Lawrence Irving and Mabel Hackney. The two performed here often, and may still appear to this day.
The Walker was built in 1906 and quickly became a social gathering place for Manitoba's upper crust. People traveled from all over to see the performances at the theatre. Many actors aspired to perform in this theatre. Two were fortunate enough to have many return engagements. Mabel Hackney and Lawrence Irving were a married acting duo who performed frequently at the Walker. It was a second home to them. They were never happier than when they were center stage at the Grand Old Walker. On the day of their last performance, they left the theatre and headed to Europe, where they planned to tour with another acting troupe. Mabel Hackney and Lawrence Irving never made it to Europe. The boat they were traveling on sank en route. They were lost at sea and presumed drowned, but their lives would never be forgotten. Many people say that their spirits live on in the Walker Theatre, often being seen in the auditorium and other areas of the building. In death, they have returned to the theater that brought them such joy in life. Here in the place that holds their fondest memories, they have found their eternal peace. Perhaps the plaque honoring them which hangs in the foyer may be yet another factor in the theater's continued haunting. These ghosts are welcome here. A young stagehand was attending to some custodial duties. He was focused and kept his mind on his work. He had no idea he was not alone. Responding to a noise he heard, he looked in the direction of the doorway. Instantly, he saw a figure, and just as quickly, it vanished. The stagehand returned to his work, but was unable to ignore the feeling of being watched.
Hi, my name's Ken Jackson. We're at the Walker Theatre in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and it supposedly has been haunted for the last, almost 100 years now. I know I've been here a few times where I've sat and watched shows by myself up in the first or second balcony, and, it seems like sometimes after a show you almost hear applause.
Rehearsals are usually conducted to an empty house. However, as two local actors were to learn, this is not always the case. Hearing applause, they looked out into the theater, but were unable to see beyond the lights. When they reached the auditorium, for the briefest of moments, they saw an apparition of two figures, and then they vanished. In another incident, after a long rehearsal, one of the actors was taking a nap on the couch. A sudden and loud noise woke him. Focusing his eyes, he saw the chandelier swaying mysteriously. Mabel Hackney and Lawrence Irving have returned to spend eternity in their beloved theater. So the next time you take in a show at the Walker, the performers on stage may not be the only ones worth watching. This high-traffic area in Victoria, British Columbia is frequented by locals and tourists alike. A business owner was on his way to work. Everything appeared normal, like any other day, or so he thought. As he approached the building which housed his business, he heard an eerie jangling as if someone was rattling chains. He looked around and saw nothing unusual. When he tried the door, it was locked, yet he was sure he had left it open. He heard the jangling again. This time, as he turned to look, he saw a ghostly figure running towards him. For this local entrepreneur, the day turned out to be anything but normal.
Bastion Square in Victoria, British Columbia is very old and very haunted. Now filled with cafes and boutiques, it was once the location of the jailhouse for the colony of Vancouver Island. The jailhouse has long since disappeared, but part of its tragic history lingers on.
Bastion Square is filled with nooks and crannies. One particular alleyway opens onto the main entrance of the square, another site of many mysterious encounters. A woman cut through the alley as she had done hundreds of times before, but on this occasion, when she entered the alley, an unsettling feeling came over her. An apparition appeared from nowhere, walking towards her. Frightened and not willing to risk going any further, she returned the way she came. Reaching the entrance to the square, once again she encountered the mysterious figure blocking her path. Completely consumed by fear, the woman fled, neither stopping nor looking back.
People walking through the alley, whether it's daytime or nighttime, whether it's stormy or quiet, hear things. Heavy, muffled footsteps walking behind them, as though men with boots are trudging deliberately, following them, sometimes with the sound of rattling chains as well, dragging along the ground.
Bastion Square is a place where many tour groups are taken to learn about Victoria's diverse history. One evening, a tourist separated from his group, a decision that, in retrospect, should have been given further consideration. The man had discovered that the stories of Bastion Square were true.
Merchants who work in Bastion Square many years ago began noticing people running out of the alley, and the merchants began to gather the stories, and slowly but surely these stories began to materialize into a bigger picture. A picture that dates back to the colonial days in Victoria, when a jail stood just here as part of Bastion Square. It's been gone since 1885, and yet some of the prisoners from that jail undoubtedly are still here.
Another alley was the place where many past prisoners were cruelly and unjustly punished. Prison guards often became judge, jury, and executioner. This alley leads right into the center of the square and is often used as a shortcut. A young woman was taking the quick route to the square when she heard someone behind her. She saw a glimpse of a man in a prison uniform, so she looked back for a second glance. This translucent figure raced towards her. The woman fled, not stopping until she was in the safety of the square. Although Vancouver's historic jailhouse is gone, prisoners of the past seem condemned to serving their sentences in the nooks and crannies of Bastion Square forever.
The most pivotal moments of our lives often revolve around the church, from christening to marriage and ultimately death. But after death, could spirits still seek that sanctuary that was so important in life? Quebec City's Cathedral of the Holy Trinity may have just such a ghost, a lost soul searching for forgiveness.
We're standing outside the Cathedral of the Holy Trinity, which is one of the stories that we featured on our tour here in Quebec City. Now, this story came to my attention a couple of years ago, and it wasn't just from one source. I had multiple people from the community talking about the goings-on at this church, the hauntings. I know that my first encounter with this shadowy figure, it was the first time I had a group of tourists in front of me and I was explaining the story, and I saw the figure go up on the second floor balcony. And because I had children on my tour, I didn't want to let them know what I was watching. And when you've learned this text so well, it just comes out of your mouth automatically. And I stood there and I literally had sweat pouring down from underneath my hat, trying not to look frightened. But my heart was absolutely pounding and I couldn't get out of that church fast enough.
Another guide on the Quebec Ghost Tour had an unnerving encounter. As she was giving her presentation to a group of tourists, she had the strange sensation of being watched, as if there was an unseen presence. Finishing the presentation, she picked up her lantern. Realizing it was no longer lit, she opened it, only to discover that the entire candle and holder had vanished. A tourist approached her and claimed he had seen a shadowy figure hovering near the lamp as she was speaking. this was one of several encounters with the spirit of the cathedral.
The hauntings on this church are going on a regular basis, again, not just with ourselves, but our tourists have experienced it, as well as the organists that have worked in this church.
Many speculate as to who this mysterious figure could be. There are two theories. One that she was a woman named Iris Dillon who lived near the cathedral during a cholera epidemic which swept through Quebec City in the 1800s. Iris barricaded herself in her house. She suffered from a condition we now know as narcolepsy, which draws its victims into death-like trances. As terrified as she was of being exposed to cholera, she was more terrified of being mistaken for one of its victims. Her greatest fear was to be buried alive. Tragically, Iris did fall into a deep narcoleptic stupor, and as she lay seemingly dead, a concerned neighbor entered the house. He mistook her condition, and that very day, Iris Dillon was buried alive at the Cathedral of the Holy Trinity. Some 50 years later, a workman outside the cathedral made an astonishing find. During construction, he uncovered a set of human remains. Many believe those remains to be the body of Iris Dillon. The second theory revolves around a woman who gave birth out of wedlock. In the 1860s, this would have resulted in both her and the newborn becoming outcasts in society. Fearing this, the woman made a horrible and devastating choice. Having nowhere to turn and no one to turn to, she took the dead infant into the cathedral during the night. Ashamed of what she had done, she carried the child's body downstairs and buried it in the basement. Entombed beneath the cathedral lay the bodies of former bishops of the Anglican Church. But under this very organ, where many have witnessed the ghostly apparition, is a small unmarked grave, wherein it is believed is buried the body of her dead infant. Some say the woman haunts this place to watch over the murdered child, while others believe she is here seeking forgiveness for her terrible deed. So much attention has been paid to life after death here that when visiting, you may encounter living proof.